G'day superstars, g'day legends, Peps back again for another season preview, and I am with Siobhan Roe of the North Talk podcast. And if there is a club that has the most intrigue going into season 2023, it has to be the North Melbourne Football Club. Not the North Kangaroos, not the Tassie Kangaroos, it is the North Melbourne Kangaroos. Look, 2022 was a crap season. We know all about that. We're going to touch on it a little bit, but most importantly, there is lots of light shining at the end of the tunnel. And Siobhan, it's great to have you here to talk about a club that is very, very close to your heart. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be on. And like you said, 2022 didn't really bear a lot of fruit for the footy club, but I haven't felt as excited about a season like this in a very long time. So it's great to be on and sharing it with you. And we had a small chat off air about how the bad times really do pave the path to appreciate the good times even more. So fingers crossed we can talk about a bit of both of that on the podcast tonight.
Exactly right. When you've been at a club and following a club, and if you haven't heard, I'm a Melbourne supporter, if you haven't listened to Lace Out over the last 5 years, but I'm a Melbourne supporter, and yes, we've been through lots of crap. Why would you barrack for that club? Why would you wear that jumper, etc.? And you deal with it. And then when you finally get the taste of that success after so long, you sit back and go, it was all worth it. So stick fat because it will turn around unless you're Essendon.
That's what I like.
Which is funny in itself, but that's another story for another day. Now, tell me, Siobhan, how did you get, first, before we go into looking at what the club's future is going to be this year, North Melbourne, tell me, where did your love for this club come from?
So it's a really interesting background. So for the first 8 years of my life, I was a mad Carlton supporter. So I grew up a blue bagger. That was Dad. He always says when I was younger that I would sit there and I'd be able to reel off every name of every player, where they played, who it was, Stephen Silvani here. And I would go to the footy with Dad every weekend. And then Mum has always been a North fan. And for whatever reason, Carlton were on the decline. But I don't think it was that. I think it was more, I liked how North was a small club and they fought for everything that they had. Not too many supporters. They didn't really have that big club aura, but the club itself had a real community vibe, and that the fans really did care so much about the club, and nothing was handed to them. There was no silver spoon there. They always scrapped and fought for what they had, and for me that was a real appeal. And I did love Boomer Harvey as well. So watching the 29 run around too. So from then on, I've been a North fan. It's progressively become more and more of a love of mine. And I recently finished a Bachelor of Sports Media, and I'm hoping to end up in the media sphere just because of how much I actually love the sport. You once I get started talking about footy, it's hard to stop me. So it's very, very exciting times ahead for the club. And like I mentioned before, it's been pretty poor the last few years, but doesn't mean that the North Melbourne spirit still isn't there. And I'll never forget the Richmond game last year where we'd had such a drought of wins, and just seeing the spirit of the club rise up again in that time made me think, okay, I really do barrack for such a great club in the bad times and the good.
Yeah, and you know what? You're a club that I think a lot of people have a soft spot for, because you know what? You aren't, let's call a spade a spade. You're not the biggest club out there. You know, every year you seem to be going, send them down to Tassie, send them down to Tassie, or send them to the Gold Coast, etc. But when you have a game like you did against Richmond last year and you get across the park and you win, my goodness gracious, does it put a smile on everybody's face to just get stuck into a Richmond supporter, even a Collingwood supporter almost as well.
Very close.
Because, it has been quite thin, but there is a soft spot because you know what? You had one of the greatest players who ever played the game run around, the Grump number 18, the Big Duck. But just the way that North Melbourne have almost played their footy from day dot is hard, brutal football. Such a long and valued history. Blight, Glendenning. You mentioned, obviously, the couple of premierships in the 70s. You got the ones, obviously, in the 90s as well, too. And the only club with a gold premiership cup, which was in 1996 for the centenary year.
Yeah.
So there is some specialness about, and also, how could you forget driving past Arden Street?
Of course.
And just raising your eyes at that beautiful Kanga Casino.
Yes.
For many, many years as well, too.
Yes,
So
there's a lot of A lot of good memories there.
There's a lot of history in that club as well too. But unfortunately, the last couple of years through, it's kind of like if anything could have gone wrong, it did go wrong. Whether it was Scott then going into Shaw, that didn't work out. Noble didn't work out. I actually thought I thought it was a pretty good acquisition when he came in. It was almost, was he not the right person for the group? That's what it sort of seemed to be. And I'll let you elaborate on that a little bit more. But now I think you got the right person at the helm. You've also got his sidekick as well in terms of Todd Viney being there as well. It just gives you that solidarity off the field that he can take the pressure and the players can just do their thing.
Yeah, that's a really, really great summation. I think first and foremost, what you mentioned there about Todd Viney and Alistair Clarkson, I think if you look at any club that's been successful in the recent history and even in well and truly way back in time, it's always been great management. There's never been a lot of conversation off the field, or when you don't hear from a CEO, I think that's when you know your club's traveling pretty well. Yep. So the management's the first part that I think we got to get right. And with Alistair Clarkson, I mean, can you get a more experienced and what's the right word? They're touted, and he's got all these accolades. I think you listen to him when he speaks. I think he's the right person to be coaching the group. And then there's Jen Watt, who's come on board as the new CEO. You've got Todd Viney there. I think Sonia Hood, all of us North Melbourne supporters absolutely love her as president. So once we're starting to get the off-field stuff right, and I think on-field success always comes from a stable off-field. If you look at Richmond, even the D's, I mean, there's a lot of clubs there that you can see that they've got that part right.
And it doesn't start. It doesn't happen all the time. I say it for years. It's almost our catch cry. If you get the off-field right, you get the on-field right. You can't have one without the other. Because then players are not thinking, well, are we going to be around? What's going on? This place is a shambles, etc. They can just concentrate on what they're employed to do, and it's to play football. So, right, if you can get that stability off field, and North didn't have it. Actually, you had it for quite a long time when James Brayshaw was there, but it's sort of like when he moved on, they tried. It just didn't gel. Then Jeff Walsh was in, Jeff Walsh was out. It's like you don't need that. Now that you've got all those pieces in the right way, in the right level, they can just concentrate on that. And you're not hearing as much of, North being this, North being that at the moment. And we know 2022 was a nightmare. You had the easiest way to look at it, don't worry about the wins. You had 2 wins, but it was the percentage of 55.78. It was actually the 9th worst percentage in the history of the game at the end of a season. So that's how bad the season was.
Yeah.
So that's what you need to put into perspective, because the percentage really gives you an indication of it might not be working at the moment, but you're close. It wasn't even close as well, too. Then you have some off-field stuff that, we're going to have a chat about a certain individual who's no longer at your club after one season as well, too, but we'll get into that in a moment.
That name's banned on North Talk. So
this ain't North Talk. It's on. This is the Pep Talk with myself, Chris Pepper. But I think let's just get the elephant in the room. The Jason Horne-Francis. What happened from your perspective, from a North perspective, with your inside knowledge or whatever? What do you think happened?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, that one, because obviously I'm not privy to him and his life, but from the outside perspective, and I was pretty strong on this, he kind of marketed himself, in my opinion, as being the number 1 draft pick. He wanted to go at number 1. So he knew that North Melbourne was going to be the club that would pick him up. And I felt that he had a really poor attitude throughout the year. Now, when you're the number 1 pick, traditionally, unless it's what happened at Essendon, and they're clearly not the worst team during the drug saga, I mean, you're going to go to a club that is pretty bad to be landing last. Exactly. And I think his attitude throughout the year, I can see perhaps if he thought that there were issues off the field and on the field, and he wasn't sure that the club was going to be stable. But as I mentioned before, again, he was going to a club that was really struggling. So his attitude throughout the year, I questioned quite a lot. And I thought to myself, his body language isn't right. Then the whole ice bath thing came out, and I just thought, mate, you've got a really poor attitude. And to be honest, I think all along he wanted to go back to Adelaide, but he also wanted to be the number 1 pick, and he played the club really nicely in securing that number 1 pick. But yet not always planning to go back to Adelaide, and felt as though I always felt there was a bit of a sense of entitlement. There was a conversation with Todd Goldstein on the field and yelling at leaders. I just thought, I don't think this guy has the right attitude. We'll see how he goes at Port Adelaide. And if there's a dramatic turnaround in the way he plays and his attitude, then all along he really just wanted to go back to Adelaide. There's no doubt the club had issues off the field and on the field that may have contributed to him wanting to go back home. But we were always going to struggle. And his attitude I always found to be a little bit not where it needed to be.
Oh, better look at me. Look. And this is where we get frustrated. You're going to go high, accept the fact that you're going to a lowly club. You've got two options. You can come in and set a good standard for other ones to follow, or you can sook it up because things haven't gone. And it felt like to me that he didn't go down. I know I use this one quite a fair bit. I've used Nick Dacos as a perfect example, who that was the standard that I want to set. Okay. As fathers, even though it was a father-son, first year, bang like this. You can even go back as far as when Tuke Miller went to the Gold Coast Suns and literally told, look, hey, if you don't want to be here, there's the door. This is a young bloke who'd only been there a season or two. There's the door. If you don't want to be, I'm here for the long run. And so you can set the standards because that sort of stuff is infectious and influential as well too. And that can be, if it's good enough for him, well, then I should maybe lift my game. It didn't feel like that at all. It was, okay, I'm here, but I don't really want to be here. So it makes you think. You remember before the draft, the Adelaide Crows offered 2 first-round draft picks for your first-round draft pick.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hindsight's 2020. Do you go back now and think, if we knew what we knew, we should have probably taken it?
Absolutely. And I think we didn't get the right deal for him, considering just the amount of talent that he does possess. I'm not talking about his football ability. I just think it's his attitude that was the issue. And clearly North really did just want to see the back of him. By the sounds of it, his attitude and poor sort of petulance almost was infectious within the group. And I think at the end of the day, they wanted him out of the club and just get whatever deal was available. But by God, would we probably have taken Richmond and Adelaide's deal back in 2021 if we knew the outcome of this.
And so 2022 hits and you go, you know what? Let's do it. GWS say, hey, we'll give you 2 first-round picks for your number 1 because you don't need the key forwards. You've got 2 absolute guns who I've got a lot of time for. One of them who's very reliable and the other one, tell you what, he reminds me of a bit of a DeGoey-like in terms of when he's on, but if he's not, stay away. Yep. But you pick up Harry Sheasel, you pick up George Wardlaw, you pick up literally 2 for the price of 1 because at 2 and 3, it's not going to make much of a difference. That was, okay, we're doing it the right way now. And that's great to see that you get 2 young guys that can come in and make an instant impact with that group from day one. And almost 2 different players as well too, one being a smaller forward and one being more of a midfield type. You've got that flexibility. So it's really nice to see North going, you know what? I want to go down that route rather than just sticking at the 1, which is good. And you had a good draft haul for the first time in quite a while, because there was a time where North would be getting a lot of those players in second hand, etc. We know about the Polak situation. That didn't work out.
Another one, you talked about disaster over the course of multiple years. I think in 2016, when they did decide to cut back the list, they should have then decided, okay, we actually need a proper clean out and go with the youth. But for too many years, they were in two minds. I mean, there were the Jared Pollock and Pittard decision, which, I mean, Clarkson's first day, he just said to Jared Pollock, thank you very much, but we're moving on from you. And I think that those decisions really come back to haunt us a little bit. And this draft haul, it was just so outstanding and so exciting. I mean, Braden George to slip to where he did too. Once he recovers from his ACL injury, we could have another little mini Jordan DeGoey or a Cam Zerha in our hands there. And clearly the Sheasel and Wardlaw are long-term solid players that could. Harry Sheasel, I mean, we haven't had an X-Factor player for a really long time, and I'm sure he's going to put bums on seats. So there's a lot of excitement to come from this draft class. Of course, Cooper Harvey as well. So there's a lot of optimism around our young kids, and these 4 or 5 that we included in 2022 are even more reason to be excited about the future.
And then there's a couple others as well too, like Will Phillips, which was a really surprising pick back in 2020. He now has some more stability around him as well too, where the coaches is going to say, hey, listen, we'll play you where we need to play it. Another one, which I think there was a great get a couple of years ago, and hopefully under the tuition of Clarkson, Jaden Stevenson, he's a rising star at Collingwood. And then for whatever reason, you guys get him, and I think he's actually been not too bad for your mob as well too. And it's sort of hard to see how good players have been when you're not winning, because even though they're busting their chops, it's not showing on the scoreboard. It's not showing in the general play as well too. So once you start actually getting a little bit more of the ball going your way, you will be able to notice what these people can bring to the party.
Absolutely. I think the one player that was contrary to that was probably Ben Mackay, who's turning into my favourite player at North. I think because the ball was living in the back line so much, he got to go hang on.
Well, he was playing 2 seasons of footy for every one season everybody else was, but that's how much ball he used to get.
But he was the one exception, but the offensive players especially really didn't get to show a lot of what they can bring. So I'm super excited for Will Phillips. He's basically like a new recruit for us, and hopefully he can get himself right to play all 22 games if he's granted that opportunity. And you mentioned there Jaden Stevenson as well. I think he's the unoffensive player. I personally think stick him back in the forward pocket where he won his Rising Star year, and there's a bit more good delivery coming out of the middle, where I think that's probably the strongest part of the ground for us. Let's hope that he can recapture a bit of that form, and Clarko can get the best out of him, because he's done it before with players. So fingers crossed Steve-O's one of them.
And he's brought in a couple of players from Fremantle, Griffin Logue and Darcy Tucker. So you get literally 2 ruckmen for that. Griffin Logue, I think, is a bargain pick, because I saw a few games have been playing last year, and I was kind of keen for him to come over to my club before Grundy came in.
Yep.
And you also pick up Daniel Howe as well too. Even though it's on a rookie side of things, the kid can play. Maybe just a change of environment is what these people need, and they're getting it. And this is the thing. I think people realise how much of an influence Clarkson. I was just even listening to something the other day that at the end of training, he told all the players, I want you to go out and just invite someone from the crowd onto the field and have a kick with them. Like, that's just, if you want to bring people to the club and show that this is what we're all about, that's the first time I've actually heard that happen.
Yeah.
And so I'm just sitting back going, this guy knows. He knows how to read the room and get the players in with the club as well. It's just a masterstroke. And I think he can take the pressure off the kids, because you've got the 15th youngest list at just close to 24 years. And from a games perspective, you're looking at 60 games. But if you take out a couple of your...
Yeah, I was going to say, if you take out Goldstein, Cunnington, you'd be looking at bare bones there.
Well, exactly right. So if you take out Goldstein, Zeeble, Liam Shields, perfect acquisition. Yeah. How many games he's going to play, I don't know, but it's the standards that the young guys can learn off. That's what we can get. But you've only got 11 people played over 100 games.
Yeah.
Now, if you've got a list of 44, 33 under 100 games, massive upside if they can get it together as well too. Tell me about this guy, because I love the hyphen. Massive fan of the hyphen, like Luke Davies-Uniacke.
Yes.
Him and Jai Simpkin. Like, that's just a partnership that you can build. You can build a midfield around. You can build a club around. It's taken Davies-Uniacke a few extra seasons than they thought.
Yep.
But he had a special year last year in such a lowly result for the club.
Yeah, I whenever you mention his name, I just get really happy. Like, he provided a lot of joy for us last year. Is
that Luke Davies-Uniacke? Yes. I'll just keep saying it if it's going to keep the smile on your face.
Oh, no, it's brilliant.
There's people listening to this going,
there's a lot of people that just love him. I think all North supporters just absolutely adore him, because he's the big show in the midfield. We haven't had Ben Cunnington for some time, obviously due to his battle with cancer, and didn't LDU step up in the absence of Cunnington. He was his season last year, and I don't mean to exaggerate here, but he's Chris Judd-like in the way that he plays. There was a moment in round 23 against the Gold Coast, which was a fairly bleak game for us, but he just got the ball out of the centre, burst through a pack and kicked the goal. And I just thought, okay, I think his problem was consistency. Yep. And he played one quarter where you just go, oh my God, like, what did I just see? And then you wouldn't see him for the rest of the game. I think in 2022, he built on that consistency, which was his major flaw. So if in 2023 he can take it from 2 quarters to 3 quarters to 4 quarters and can play like that, we've got a really, really special player on our hands. And he landed, I think it was third in the Sid Barker medal. And last year, his first half of the year wasn't great, and then the second half basically got him a third place. So he's a really special talent. And I think alongside Simpkin, alongside Phillips, alongside George Wardlaw, Cunnington, who comes back into the midfield, that's our strongest line. And he'll provide some good service to the forwards if we can start getting that part of the ground right as well.
But even ones like Bailey Scott comes third in the Sid Barker medal. The hyphen came second. Jai Simpkin, like he's just getting better and better. Like these kids who you haven't seen because their names don't get read out that much because they're not getting much of it, they're going to start to shine. And I think just having that stability towards the end of the year is like, guys, just play. Regardless of what it is, we're just going to get the games into you because we're not going to achieve anything. So we can sit and play the old ones. My thing was when they did that massive cull a number of years ago, I think that they could have left Boomer. I reckon he definitely had another year in him.
Yep.
Especially the way the game is being played now. So that might have helped, but you've got two rippers there in terms of Larky and Zerha. Like they keep talking about the Twin Towers down at Geelong, and they keep talking about the Brothers of Destruction over at Carlton. But you've got two young ones there that when they get it on, they get it on. And I'm a massive fan of Nick Larky.
Yeah, so am I. So am I. And there's another name there, Charlie Comben. I don't know if many people outside of the North sort of supporters know what type of talent we've got on our hands there. He's someone that when I say he's unlucky with his body, I mean it's incredibly unlucky, and he's a real talent. And if we can just get some consistency and a pairing between Larky and Comben, I feel like we've got two twin towers there that can do a lot of damage on the scoreboard. But again, Nick Larky with poor service inside that forward line delivers week in, week out. I still think he's got more areas of his game to improve on, but in a team that, once again, like the ball delivery down there is poor at most of the game, he manages to seize his opportunities. And without him, I don't think we would have had a very good year in terms of scoring, even though it was pretty poor to begin with. I think you mentioned something before there that triggered something in my mind. I think the best part about getting Alistair Clarkson as our coach is I think he'll have a game plan that will actually allow for our weaknesses to not be exposed so much and allow for our strengths to come through. So I believe Nick Larky's season this year will probably go to another level if Clarkson can work out a way to get that ball into him a bit quicker and a bit cleaner too. So, and I mean, there's Cullen Coleman-Jones as well who can play in the forward line. I struggled to understand why they didn't play him more forward last year and why he wasn't paired up with Larky as much. So look for that in 2023 as well. Potentially a pairing between Larky and Coleman-Jones to provide another forward target. So fingers crossed we can score some more goals, and they're not always coming from Larky, who continues to defy odds, really.
You know, I'm not a betting man. Like I don't gamble, and if I do it responsibly.
Of course.
Larky kicked 38 goals in a team that ended up on a percentage of 55.
Yeah.
Now, if he can get a lot cleaner ball, he is a massive, massive chance for a Coleman.
Like you're thinking.
He only needs, if he gets 50% more of that, what's that, mate? 38 is 19, 49, 56. I think the leader had 63 by the end of the season. So, you know, we're not talking a massive overall jump, but there is definitely something there because when he's on, he's on.
Yeah. I'll never forget the bag of 7 he kicked against Carlton, and that was an unlikely win. That wasn't last year, the year before, but I played on Jacob Wiedering that day, and he ripped him a new one. It was so good to see. When he's on, you're right, he builds up momentum and he can really kick a bag for us.
And you've got a couple of young guys that got a bit of a taste of it last year as well too. So they got their 50% of game time. Charlie Lazzaro and Tristan Zeri as well too. So you've just, once again, one's a forward ruck in terms of Zeri, Charlie Lazzaro. It's just a funny name every time I hear it. He's not exactly a massive guy, but he can be just a running powerhouse inside.
Yep.
Midfield forward as well too. It's just, you go all the way up. Even Aaron Hall, like
Yeah.
He was leading a Brownlow at one stage many, many moons ago. So the guy can play. Maybe he just hasn't had that reality check because he's been a bit poor, I would say, in the last couple of seasons.
Yeah,
but
I
he's
think
still
sometimes
running
it's
around as well too.
Yeah, he is. And I think by the looks of it, Alistair Clarkson likes those halfback players that can distribute the ball nicely.
Yep.
I think sometimes his disposal lets him down, but he's not afraid to take the game on, and we don't have many of those smaller defenders that can run and break lines. So he's a great asset down there. It's a great point, Chris.
Yeah, I think you're going to have it's just going to be a completely different North Melbourne team that goes out structurally, personnel-wise, etc. Look, is it going to be a bottom four finish? Let's be honest, probably. But once again, if that percentage goes to 80%, that's been a massive growth factor. It's not always about the wins; it's how you lose.
Yeah.
Perfect example is Collingwood. Yeah, they had many, many wins, but it wasn't super convincing. It was a point here, a couple. They only need a couple to go the other way, and they fall off the cliff too. So it's how you play and how you're scoring, and also stopping that was going to be the big difference. Look, there is a lot of love, full stop, for two guys on your list. And you know who I'm going to say. They're the elder statesmen. Actually, I'd probably say three, and I'll tell you why the third one. Todd Goldstein.
Yes.
Like probably the premier ruckman, top three ruckman in the league over the last 10 years. Just doesn't seem to stop. I've seen him tear games apart, whether it's around the ground or up forward. They're saying it might be his last season, etc. I think you need to have that old school mentality around. I think with having that super sub now, the substitute that can come on, that might be the opportunity for able to bring somebody else in and have that spare midfielder. So if they want to then remove him off the ground, they can, or if it's working in tandem with somebody else, perfect. The other guy that we mentioned a moment ago, and it came up, is Ben Cunnington.
Yeah.
I think everybody just loves the way that guy plays.
Yeah,
like that's what football. That's what football is. It's just, and the way that he represents the club.
For any other team, I really feel like he'd get a lot more notoriety and would be all Australian by this point in his career. He's
maybe, but I would say that if you said, you know, who's a player from another team that you would just love to have in your midfield, it would be him. He's just reliable every single week, you know, and he's 31. It's a shame he's played 229 games. I reckon the first 200 were magnificent, and the last 29 have been very much interrupted. But obviously your health is most important. But the last guy who's been your captain for quite a number of years, good old Jack Zeeble, look, he's turning 32 by the time the season comes around. Look, I have a lot of love for footballers who do two things. First of all, tuck their jumper in, and the second one, pull your socks up.
Yeah.
And he's just got class, and he's had to lead the club in times where it hasn't been great. And for those three, just to say, hey, listen, we'll set the standard. It's going to be a shame when they move on. So enjoy it, North supporters, for as much as you possibly can, because I think Zeeble will be the first, and then depending on health-wise, Cunnington, and then I reckon Goldstein, if it's not this year, it'd have to be the next.
He's going to play his 300th game. Unfortunately, it'll be during a Magic round in a very quiet part of Adelaide, but I think that probably sums him up a little bit too in that.
Only if they play him.
Yeah, you'd think that they would.
Why wouldn't you? For a guy's playing 300, why would you play it in Adelaide? Goodness gracious. Just forget it. Put him on ice. Zeri, you're racking all day with Tucker. That's it. We're fine. We'll take care of it ourselves. Yeah, do that. All right, I have to ask you about this one because I'm not too privy with the story. The whole Taron Thomas thing.
Yeah.
What's going on there?
Yeah,
he's another one of these. Reminds me a bit of Horn Francis. Like he's got all the talent in the world. Something's just not clicking at the moment.
Yeah. Obviously, there's a lot of off-field issues as well. Yep. And personally, I think if those off-field issues escalate in the not too distant future, we'll probably hear of him being stood down, or there's some intervention pretty soon. He's got all the talent in the world, but unfortunately, I don't think over the last year or so he's actually applied that talent to hard work, which is probably kind of what you were intimating there with Horn Francis as well. There were obviously some issues last year off field and personally, but I also think he got a little bit too far ahead of himself. And yeah, it's something to keep an eye on, because I think if he can't get those off-field issues right, as much as he's got talent to burn, and is a great player for us on the field, like we mentioned at the start of this podcast, if you can't get your back house right, you don't want the media spotlight being on your club for the wrong reasons, especially with one player, if he's not actually willing to get those issues right. So, and it's unfortunate because Taron Thomas, I think for a lot of us supporters through dark times as well, came in and we just thought we've got the next superstar on the list. And it looked that way for a while, then declined pretty slowly. And I don't know if he's actually found a home in a position yet either. He seems to play.
That's a good point.
Yeah, up forward a little bit, through the midfield at times. Apparently he's training down back under Clarkson to play off half back. But once he finds his role, we might see a little bit more from him. But at this point, I think he's a little bit lost in his career. So fingers crossed we can get the best out of him on and off the field, because otherwise might just be another career lost where there could be a lot of potential there for him.
And the good thing about playing down back, you've only got really two things you need to do. Mind your man and stop him.
Yeah, the ball.
That's literally it. You don't really have to think about getting into position. When I say this, as much, you don't have to try and be as creative. You don't have to be the one who's responsible for getting the ball to you. You can pretty much follow your opponent and they will lead you to the ball. Yeah. So if that just gives him some security, hey, listen, mate, for the first half of the year, we're playing you here. But we just want you to stop your man, run off half back and give us that drive. If that's one less thing that he needs to think about, that might be what he needs to push his career future. And then, okay, let's build on from that as well too. So that might be like a bit of a soft reset for him as well too. And that's not exactly a bad thing at all.
They did it with James Stevenson last year. So I'm hoping that it will work for Taron Thomas as well, because his offensive game's brilliant. I know he's got a lot of talent. So it's just about getting these things right. And fingers crossed he can be another one of those players where we can say we've got Thomas, Simpkin, LDU, Phillips to throw through the midfield.
Scott as well too. Yeah. It's almost like you need to say to him, Taz, I want you to stick next to Ben Cunnington.
Yeah.
And whatever he does, you do. For this preseason, you're his shadow. Yeah. And just learn what you need to do to be a gun footballer. Yeah. Exactly right. All right, let's have a look at 2023 from a club perspective. All right, so you've got the Liz Smiley ski double-ups. Who are they going to be? You've got Essendon, Gold Coast, Hawthorn, Melbourne, St Kilda, West Coast. Not a bad run of teams that you have to play twice. You have got the 18th hardest fixture, which when you finish last, that's what you should get.
Yeah.
Your first four, West Coast at home, that's definitely win potential.
Yeah, I know this sounds silly, but that game is almost the most important game of the year, and it's round one.
Do you know the interesting thing is I had a chat to the West Coast crew, Was a King from Eagle Nation earlier in the week, and he said exactly the same thing.
Yes,
for a different reason, especially with Simpson, etc. If they get off to a bad start, it's going to be, okay, what are we going to see here? The practice matches are going to be also another thing. What do we see different as well too? You got Fremantle away.
Yeah.
You've got Hawthorn away. That'd be at the G?
That'll be in Tasmania, I think.
That might be Tasmania, so, bring the thermals. And Carlton at home as well too, which is literally their home ground anyway. So there is a potential there for West Coast and Hawthorn for 2 wins.
Yeah.
And if you were 2-2 after 4 games, hey, that's more than you did for the previous year combined. So anything after that is a bonus.
Yeah.
And then your last 3 are Essendon at home, Richmond away, and Gold Coast at home as well too. So if you can just get the train back on the tracks and driving straight, there is definitely plenty of upside. To the point, I'm not even actually tipping you to finish last.
Wow.
This year. I don't think you'll finish last.
If you do
another team that I'm a bit more concerned about, but they're not in this state.
Okay. The GWS Giants. Yeah,
I'm just a bit concerned with them, and that's. Yeah, I'm just a bit concerned with them at the moment as well too. And if Essendon can't get their scoring right, they'll be down there. And I think it'd be out of you and Hawthorn, to be honest. And I just think that there's probably more upside to North just with the Clarkson factor as well too. So
I really feel like if we can get that win in round one against West Coast, it sets up the year. It tells us, okay, we're not horrible. We can win. This team gets a bit of belief, gets a bit of momentum. Then we head into Hawthorn, which is another winnable game. We won in round one. We did it. We beat West Coast at home. Let's go. Like, I mean, that game is huge, and I think it's also one of the winnable games that we actually have. So we got to grab that game and run with it. So it's huge. I know it sounds silly. It's round one.
They say don't play for round one, but for some clubs, it's to instill, hey, you know what? We can do this.
Yeah.
And if you lose by 3 or 4 goals, I'm just saying, if you go down to if you played out to the end and you see some, we're not just giving you good job, but there's actually some spirit in there. You go, you know what, boys? We didn't win today, but look at all the positives. We didn't have that last year. We've got this now. How do we build on that? And that's where Clarkson's the beautiful messenger, how he can turn that narrative into, hey, you know what? Yeah, this didn't work, but have a look at this.
Yeah.
You're doing this. It's all that 1%. If we can get 1% better every single day in what we do, by the end of the year, it's a 300% increase. It's awesome. It's amazing.
I love that, Pep, because you're right. It's not all about wins and losses, especially for North Melbourne. It's about individual growth. It's about team growth, game plan, game style. It's all of those things. So,
and you saw some growth. You saw some growth out of that. Now, instead of 5 players growing, we can get making 10 to 12 grow.
Yeah.
What does that do for everybody else as well too? It's a perfect spot to be in. Perfect spot to be in. Now, Siobhan, I have a question for you. All right. So, if we were to have a look and put the glass lenses of your beautiful eyes onto the 2023 season, which teams do you think are going to be sliding down the ladder? Which teams do you think are going to be scrolling up the ladder? You can include your own and obviously have a look at some others as well too. So let's just start with, who do you think are going to drop in terms of out of the 8, drop down ladder considerably, not have a year like they did in 2022?
Mentioned them before. I think Collingwood, there was a little bit of a smoke and mirror situation there. I'm not saying they're going to fall off the face of the earth, but top 4, they certainly overachieved. I think if you take away some of those games they won by under a goal, they'd be back in the pack. So I do think that Collingwood are one of the sliders. If possible, I do think Brisbane can even land as minor premiers. If you look at who they picked up in the off-season, I mean, Jack Gunston, McKenna, Dunkley, there's so much more talent they can add to that list. So
that Ashcroft kid,
yeah,
have you heard about him?
he can get thrown into that midfield too. So just with their inclusions, I think they've actually got to improve, even though they already made finals last year. I'm with you, and I think that Hawthorn will slide more than they did. They lost so much experience, and that was all voluntarily. But O'Meara, Mitchell, just to name a few of those that walked out the door.
One that went to your club in Howe.
Yes.
Shields.
Yeah.
As well too. So yeah, it's a lot has gone through. I know what they're planning to do, and it does make sense. But sometimes we saw it happen with North when you cut too much out. Have you got enough to
gain? But I think
exactly.
Hawks is substantial.
Yep.
I think the other team that I'll throw at you, I do think that that Port Adelaide will play finals. I think that their year last year was underwhelming to say the least, but they've also picked up JHF and Willie Rioli.
Voldemort, who shall not be mentioned.
So they've certainly got some more upside in that list as well. So there are a couple of names there, and I'm sure there's always a team that surprises us, like Collingwood did last year, and fingers crossed the Roos can also surprise a few.
I don't think if something happened this year, I don't think it would surprise, because they've had a couple very lean years. But like I said, to get the we say the great man to come in and put that into the group, it'll be how much. Like, you can look at it, I reckon halfway through the season will be the judge, because you sort of get that honeymoon period. It's like I said, when it gets to the colder months, that's when it starts to come out. And if you sit back and halfway and you go, you know what, all right, we're 9-3, pick a number out, right? But we can see improvement here. If you can see that, that's a win. And that's where I think it's going to happen. And that's why I don't think that you're going to be the bottom. Probably, I would say bottom 4, but it's just because 2 factors. The teams above you are probably just in a better spot at the moment.
Yeah.
And you are rebuilding to an nth degree. The whole club is rebuilding. So once that starts to come, mate, people love North. People love North. You know, we love Blighty. We love Barry Cable Days. We love the Duck. We loved Arch. some of the greatest players ever to play the game wore the blue and white stripes. Not the hoops, the stripes. And you know what? Not many football grounds had an elephant running around the boundary. So there's something definitely on your side as well too. So who's taking it out? Who's taking out the 2023 premiership in your eyes? Once again, if you've got 1, 2, 3 clubs that you think who could take it out, please be my guest.
So I think there's 2 that stand out significantly. Now, You're going to be pretty pleased with this one, but I do think that the Ds are back and they're most certainly primed. I think the final series for Melbourne in 2022, I don't know what happened because there's so much,
I can tell you what it was.
Yeah, the Swans game was a bit of a surprise. And I think there's way too much talent on that list. And I think that the disunity potentially that was going on in 2022 hopefully will be rectified. And if that part of it gets right, I think that the talent, the game plan, there's too much there to not actually go again. So I would not be surprised to see the Ds take it out. And the other team that I mentioned before in the Brisbane Lions, the MCG is the biggest challenge for Brisbane. But once again, the list, the game plan, their defence is probably the biggest worry and an area of the ground that could let them down. But they've got a lot of upside too. So I think it'll probably be out of Melbourne and Brisbane. But I also wouldn't be surprised to see Geelong there.
I know. It just keeps coming up. The old retirement home. The old retirement home just keeps coming up. Yeah, but I agree.
They'll be top 4 again. They get those home games down at Kardinia Park, GMHBA, I should say, stadium. And they're just going to be unstoppable in the finals too. And now they've got that monkey off the back and they've won one. I wouldn't be surprised to see them win it again. But back-to-back's really hard to do. So that's why I think the Ds are the quiet sleepers of
Geelong, they only slotted in another 4 first-rounders this year. But the people that they traded in that Bose pick, that's just...
I know. We'll never belong at the bottom of the ladder, will we? They continue just to laugh at the rest of the competition.
Yeah, I know. They're just that anomaly that just does not make sense. But it somehow works. It's like when you go and play golf and there's the person who's got the worst golf swing in the world and you look at him and go, how in the hell? And how would you shoot? 74. And you just look at him with you look like a newborn giraffe when you hit that thing, but yet you're still able to. Everybody's got that friend like they can just never do wrong. They're perfect at everything that they do, and that's a bit like they're awesome. Now, what are you planning for North Talk this year? Because I know the listeners are sitting here going, Siobhan, she's an absolute superstar. I know I've heard her before, but she's taken over from Ross. And I like the cut of her jib. What are the plans for the podcast this year? How many episodes a week? What's the sort of the lay of the land for yourself?
Yep. So the plan will be to sit down with Ross, the boss, and just work out how we cut up the podcast this year. But North Talk will definitely still be around. So have a listen to it. I'm certain that it'll be a little bit more upbeat than what we heard in 2022. So it's still yet to be decided. Just like a lot of things in footy, it's still up in the air. But we'll well and truly be back for 2023, and hopefully there's, like I mentioned, a few more positive podcasts rather than always feeling a little bit down in the dumps. North Talk will be back for 2023, and give us a listen.
Well, if you're going to be on the airwaves, it's going to be positive because I could listen to you all day. You're awesome. But most importantly, look, you do it because you love your club. I do it because I love footy, and that's what it's all about. And you know what? We may not be so-called ex-boys, and we don't care because our passion is in our heart for our football clubs and the great game that we play too. And I can hear that in your voice. And so if you're representing the North Melbourne Football Club on the airwaves, they should be sit back and go, you know what, this one's a ripper. How do we get them the media accreditation? Because you are an absolute star. Listeners, that is your 2023 North Melbourne season preview with the amazing, the charismatic, the suave Siobhan Roe. But Ron, I have one last question for you, and it is simply this. How do you want your footy?
I want my footy lace out.
Yes, we had the hint. We spoke about this before.
You did. I went blank in the moment. I had a
That's all right. Yeah. I often have that effect. Listeners, I think North are going to be improving quite considerably next year. And I think by the end of the year, you're going to have a smile on your face because you are definitely going in the right direction. Take care, enjoy the season, and Siobhan, I want to hear you on more. Thanks for listening to our latest episode. If you haven't done so already, make sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review on iTunes. I'm your host, Chris Pepper, and with Jamie Wallis, we give you your footy how you want it. Peace out.